So let me start with this tweet here about humor. Humor involves exaggerations, elements that are off or wrong, and it is not to be taken seriously. What are normally seen as harmful or dangerous situations become avenues for comedy and catharsis. Holding comedy to a moral standard is a fool's errand, and not a fool I would go see. Okay, so just to begin dissecting the topic of humor, the definition of humor, of course, you can go and check with subject matter experts. Go to Google or DuckDuckGo, wherever you'd like to dissect humor with a comedian, maybe take a master class with someone like Patton Oswalt or Joe Rogan. So humor involves exaggerations. There's always an exaggeration to every joke, something that is too much or too little, something that draws it out of reality and into the absurd. Of course, we all know, if you're watching this video, you know what humor is, but it's important that we cover the full context, the full story. Elements that are off or wrong are included in these exaggerations. Of course, there's such they're elevating things that don't make any sense. There's too much of this part and this component to the joke, you know, and that's why it's funny. It's not normal. It's not expected. It's the unexpected. So it's wrong too. Things that are not supposed to be there, they will be seen as funny because they're out of place. There's something off, and it's got this light overtone of humor and satire, and it's not to be taken too seriously. It's not intended to necessarily evoke a specific response other than laughter or smiles and good feels, dopamine, serotonin, and maybe a little oxytocin. But of course, all humor, especially that which is less politically correct, can also produce something called cortisol, the stress hormone, in people. It can give people a little bit of pushback when they should be really laughing. The desired effect. Sometimes we say things that do not produce the desired effect in our friends, family, and other human beings on this quite irrational plane we call human consciousness. So, what are normally seen as harmful or dangerous situations become avenues for comedy and catharsis. So, how many movies have you watched, especially since the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where they might be a buddy comedy, buddy cops, or there's just people doing death-defying stunts, even Jackass, when Jackass was on TV, on MTV, about 2 decades ago. And I know there's newer episodes, but I haven't watched it since back in the early 2000s. People actually did dangerous stunts because it's funny and it's exciting and it's interesting. But there's also all kinds of humor that involves dangerous situations. Somebody messing around with a gun, somebody driving a car the wrong way, handling machinery the wrong way. You have things like when Wile E. Coyote runs off a cliff after the Roadrunner in Looney Tunes. There's so many places where humor includes something that you would never want anybody to do in real life. But it's funny, it's absurd, it's ridiculous, and sometimes it's even non sequitur. It's random, it's off, it's beautiful. Taking it too seriously is when things start to break down a little bit, because people do apply their filters, their codes, their political correctnesses, their modern religions to this. They look for moralism, and not just modern religions, but traditional religions too. Humor, of course, with traditional religions like Christianity and Islam, and Hinduism, and Buddhism, and all these different things out there. Okay, the Native American religions just across the entire globe. If you apply those moral filters to it, it starts to, undermine the humor element of it. Because it's not intended to be correct. It's intended to be incorrect, off, or wrong. So these harmful or dangerous situations, slapstick humor is danger in humor. People attacking each other, punching each other, causing violence on each other, but it's got this comedic impact. And of course, I do think that people have backed off a little bit on that over the years due to being a bad influence on children or those who don't understand the difference between humor and reality. So holding comedy to a moral standard is a fool's errand and not a fool I would go see. So I personally, I love the idea of clean comedians like Bill Cosby, right? And then also the not so clean comedians such as Louis C.K. and others. But in essence, holding comedy to a moral standard does produce this effect of the you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. The material isn't meant to be morally correct or exactly fitting reality. It's intended to provoke a response of laughter, something that's inappropriate, something that might be disgusting or otherwise, it may be something that isn't what your parents taught you or you learned in church or in school. It might be politically incorrect. It might be that maybe, like my new video, equally offensive, the unfairness of being politically correct. Maybe we all, deserve to be offended at one point or another in terms of, we don't deserve to be offended, but it's more like, and just because someone's making a joke about us doesn't mean they intend to hurt us. Maybe we're all laughing together. Maybe everybody is equal under this idea of humor as a binding force that brings us all together. Nobody is exempt from humor. Nobody is exempt from being the butt of a joke. Nobody is exempt from playing a joke. We're not trying to be moralistic here. I mean, there's obviously humor out there that it's intended to hurt, that is intended not just to make people laugh, but to make people act in a certain way. Humor can be a vehicle for propaganda. Humor can be a vehicle for persuasion, and that persuasion may be closer to manipulation. It might not be something that's good or helpful, but something that's designed to achieve a specific goal for the person using it. So you have to be watchful. But holding it to moral standards makes it so that I don't really particularly care for people that do politically correct humor. I mean, it just means that they've imposed a restriction on themselves that they might be able to work well in, but for my tastes, I prefer when things are extreme and they're otherworldly and they're different. When you're really constricted and then people are saying, well, if you joke about this, you're a bad person. I'm like, look, it's a joke. It's not intended to harm. It's intended to inspire laughter and to entertain. And I prefer comedians that are unfiltered, that just say that they say the things that are our base human impulses versus trying to be above it all. And then, of course, these politically correct comedians might dip into a little bit of the social justice and other things that they might go against the humanitarian or humanistic bent of their work just to make fun of the approved things we can make fun of. You can't make fun of this group or this person, but you can make fun of this one for arbitrary reasons. So there's definitely that. And your mileage may vary. I mean, you might enjoy clean comedians or politically correct comedians, but I personally would not go see them.